Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy piloting a can full of whoop-ass, written by chipathing. My shuttle orbited over the Perskelian stronghold, drifting just out of reach of their orbital cannons. I looked around the drop bay at the other occupants. There were 50 of us in total, all clad in the same 1.5-ton power armor. Most of us had given our armor a personalized paint job to separate ourselves from the olives. There were a few of them in our platoon, their armor still stock olive drab without any scuffs or marks. I envied them as I recall my first drop. I adjusted the rate of fire on my mag repeater and sealed my helmet. I'd seen too many veterans get cocky and leave their helmet off till the last minute, only to suffocate to death in the vacuum when the hull got breached. As I donned my helmet, I was greeted by music of choice by our CO. We all referred to him as CO, even though everyone knew his name, which, for the record, was Richard Cummins, so we obliged him and called him CO. The music in question was a Martian metal band recounting the first human assault on the Perskelian territory. It was his personal favorite, and against my will, I'd memorized the lightning-fast lyrics and found myself mimicking the lines. One of the rookies in our unit interrupted the music. "And you're absolutely certain that Nakota completed their side of the mission, because if they don't take down the point defense, we're all jumping into a cluster feck." He was interrupted by the pilot. "We're beginning drop procedures, everybody. Get your vac suits ready and make sure your vents work, or you'll waste a perfectly good set of armor. Also, you'll be dead. We're 2 minutes out and counting." I focused on my breathing and followed the frantic beat of the music. The G-forces around me shifted, and if I wasn't magnetically mounted to the floor of the ship, I'd be floating in the air. The engines kicked in for a course correction. G-forces pushed us to the back of the ship. I grabbed a heavy gauge bar above me. The rookie piped in again. "'Cause I'm not dying because some bugger didn't know which end of the rifle to use." The rest of the squad laughed and opened comms. "You've never met a Nakota, have you, Jennings?" said our CO. "No, sir. Grew up in Amber Station. Never met an alien other than a Varlance." "Then believe me when I say they ain't cannon fodder. Perskelian com traffic is nominal, which means our insect compadres are fine. Just follow orders and shoot what we tell you to, and you'll be fine. And for God's sake, adjust your grenades. I don't want you clearing a room with 2-kiloton grenade by accident." We all had a chuckle as Jennings fumbled with his 8 grenades and dialed them all the way to the lowest setting. I spotted a few other rookies doing the same. CO wasn't kidding either. The number of squads killed by an idiot rookie going full nuclear with one of the grenades was sparking debate on whether or not to put training wheels on their grenades. 30 seconds and counting. Last one out, lock the door," said the pilot. CO switched comms to one way and began linking the squad to the rest of the army and support vessels. My visor updated with the positions of orbiting bombardment ships and their targeted regions, ammo status of any supporting ships, as well as status reports of all nearby squads. Lastly, the visor provided a digital outline of the battlefield that we'd be fighting in. Fortified areas and those with disadvantageous terrain were outlined, and enemy force concentrations were marked by red zones on the map, with friendly forces as green. Nakota were notorious for disabling their transmitters to stay off the network. Why? Because they are properly paranoid and make things complicated as a result. "All right," the CO said. "We and the rest of 6 Company are dropping onto the industrial capital of the planet. Our mission is to purge the region of ground troops and seize these factories." Several buildings a few kilometers in size became highlighted. "The Perskelians are developing a new atmosphere and vacuum fighter in those factories, so bombardment is out. We need the prototypes intact. All other structures are fair game. All non-combatants are secondary priority. Capture if possible, and if not, fry 'em. The Nakota are disabling short-range point defense so that we can drop directly on top of the industrial park. After that, our orders are to push to the facilities through their defensive lines. Dropping in 5, everybody. Nice knowing you, the pilot said. I counted down in my head and held my breath. The floor gave way beneath my feet. We immediately plummeted to the planet below. All around us, other dropships were doing the same, depositing thousands of drop troops to the planet below. CO, being an audiophile he is, switched from the pump-up metal to old Earth classical. I'm not sure what code jockey thought a combat computer needed a display for music, but whoever they were deserve a raise. Verdi Requiem blasted through our speakers as we engaged our reactor thrusters to get into an impact trajectory with the planet. Just over the horizon of the planet, the Verlon Striker fleet dueled the Pescelian orbital garrison and Pescelian Third Fleet. From this distance, I could make out individual Varlan ships jumping into and out of subspace to attack the Pescelians from new angles. With any luck, we could destroy both fleets and wipe out their escorted transports. We'd have complete control of the system at that point. I felt the atmosphere push against my feet while we fell planetside. The further into the atmosphere, the more of me became consumed in fire. Outside my armor, the heat would cook flesh into ash in seconds, while inside it was standing at a cozy 21 centigrade. We are 20k from the drop zone, 10 more, and we'll be within short-range point defense kill zone. Let's hope the infiltration team did their job, said the CO. I thought you said that they were fine, shouted Jennings. A little late to complain about that now, rookie, replied the CO. Odds are Pescelian point defense won't kill you. Jennings sighed in relief. Oh, thank God. Exactly. Me personally, I am more worried about the heavily contested industrial heartland that we're about to land in, or my reactor thrust cutting out and plummeting to my death. Odds are at least one of us will die when we hit the ground. I'm not completely green, sir, said Jennings. I know how to do an orbit jump. Our descent slowed as we hit thicker parts of the atmosphere, and still there was no point defense wire. Sir, shouted Sergeant Coke, Pescelian comms just jumped through the roof. They're freaking out down there. I think we lost the element of surprise. Nakota must have been found out. I could hear the CO curse under his breath. Time to do what humans do best, ladies and gentlemen. Pulling alien asses out of fire. Targeting computers are getting in range. I want you pre-aimed and primed before we touch down. Impact in 10. My targeting computer came online and outlined well over 1,000 points on the horizon. I warmed up the coils of my rifle. I kicked on the vent thrusters, and a cloud of superheated coolant exploded out of my back in a barely controlled burst. My vision darkened as the G-forces hit 15 for a moment. I felt my feet hit the ground hard. Shock servos blew out as I broke the fall and kept my body from doing a convincing impression of an accordion. I didn't have time to adjust my eyes to the dust-swept landscape and relied on target pips on my visor to know where to shoot. Each pull of the trigger sent out a burst of 50 tungsten carbide pellets. I shouldered my rifle and lined up target after target, allowing my computer to mark the next target and adjust for windage and distance. Around me, the platoon ignored cover and focused on advancing towards the targets. Our greatest strength was our shock. In a 3-day engagement, we inflicted a third of the casualties within the first hour. They're stuck in. Call your targets and flush them out, said the CO. I painted a cluster of squads on the second floor of the factory. I dialed back a grenade to 2 tons and loaded it into the mag launcher on my shoulder. The others did the same. When we launched our grenades, the whole Earth shook. 17 explosions ranging from half a ton to 3 tons worth of TNT went off in short succession. Looks like everyone but Jennings made it, said the CO. I looked over to where he'd landed. His legs and half his torso were flattened to the ground. The poor bastard flooded his reactor and lost thrust, said Coke. She bowed her head in respect. We don't have time to grieve right now, said the CO. We're bleeding initiative. Everyone solemnly agreed and pressed forward into the industrial park as the battle raged around us. We charged towards the blown-out buildings with over 100 Pescilian infantry in it. 4 of our own kneeled down and sprayed bursts of tungsten at any of them, too stupid to try and get a snapshot off. Meanwhile, Coke and I turned on our vent thrusters and loaded another batch of grenades into our launcher. We jumped 6 stories to the top of the building and fired our grenades at the roof. I watched hundreds of tons of concrete and cerama steel crumble on top of the Pescilians pinned down by suppressing fire. Coke was the first to drop down through the debris and begin hunting down survivors. I joined her and combed through the halls while the rest of the squad checked the lower levels. Coke and I found a wounded Pescilian warrior clutching at a Takari blade and slicing away at a leg to free herself. Coke looked at me and shrugged. She pulled out a sidearm and pointed it at the Pescilian warrior. With one pull of the trigger, a layer of bright foam coated her face and she fell unconscious. I pulled out my knife and chopped through her leg. Once free, I doused the wound in biofoam. We walked away and declared the level clear. I tagged the Pescilian warrior for recovery. Sparing the wounded made capturing prisoners much easier. Get a reputation for not taking prisoners, and they'll fight to the last. Get a reputation for sparing them and break their morale quickly enough, they give up. 4 grenades, 1,000 rounds, and 12 buildings later, we'd breached the Pescilian lines of defense and fell upon the facility alongside 2 other squads of our platoon. In total, 28 of us came down in a titanic building. We grouped up into fire teams of 2 and breached the building. We were right behind the detonation, relying on our armor to absorb the shock. On the other side, I spotted 4 dead and a hallway scattered with cover. Over a dozen Pescilian trained their rifles on me. I felt my armor disintegrate in thin layers to absorb the laser fire. I switched my rifle to chainsaw grip and sprayed down their positions. Pescilian torsos were cleaved from their legs in one sweep of my weapon. Coke and I switched to magnesium rounds, and I'd set most of the targets on her side on fire. I set my grenade to fission before moving forward. Coke and I pushed through the dilapidated walls to the main hangar. Our section of the hangar was deathly quiet. Pescilian bodies lay on the ground with subtle burn marks in their backs and heads. We looked around trying to find the source of the kills. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shimmer that my suit had ignored. I set my rifle to it and held fire until I could identify it. The shimmer stopped and examined me. A moment later the shimmer was gone, and in its place a 4-armed figure, dropped from the wall, had approached us. "Many thanks for the assistance," it said. Looking over the figure, it was obvious that it was a Nakota. Its armor was similar to ours, sans the heavy 2-centimeter plating. In its place was a rough metallic mesh, which I assumed was camo mesh the Nakota were infamous for using. It carried an X-ray rifle with 2 additional smaller X-ray beams on its shoulders. Its lower hands had access to 2 fearsome-looking nanoblades as well. "We were a diversion, weren't we?" I asked. "Very astute. The most effective one at that. Pescilians are organized, but are predictable. As soon as you made groundfall, their warriors went exactly where they needed to be, and where we wanted them to be. I hope that you are not offended." I shrugged. "Just let us know ahead of time next time, so we don't try too hard." "And that's why we didn't." I looked next to the Nakota at the fighter draped in graphene tops. From under the form-fitting fabric, it was clear to see from my uneducated eye that it looked badass. What? I'm a grunt, not an engineer. "Was it worth it?" I asked, motioning at the fighter. "We hope so." My comm opened up. It was the CO. "Fleming, Coke, we got problems. The Pescilian broke through the blockade. The entire First Army of Orbis is going planetside. Group up! We have to hold this place whether we want to or not." "Coke, go ahead. I'll catch up." I turned my attention to the Nakota. "Can we count on your assistance?" The Nakota nodded. "In this moment, our fates hinge on the same result. So, yes." End of story. The algorithm reckons you should be watching this video next, and I recommend that you should be always watching my video. So, click with energy! And yes, clicking that does help the channel. Thank you very much. I would just quickly like to give thanks to our Tier 5 members: Elithia, Barky, Feudicuel, Meridian117, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Albarden Gusta, Savage Patch Papa, and Lord Azrakal.